Welcome back to the Seedy AF podcast. I'm Jocelyn.
And I'm the Omega. Thanks for joining us for another episode where we dive into the diverse desires of our industry. Now let's get seedy.
In today's episode, we'll be addressing a thought-provoking question from Callisto on our Patreon. Callisto asked, different people are looking for different things in AVNs. How do you deal with people's diverse, sometimes conflicting desires when deciding what kind of game to develop? Do you just follow your vision, or do you try to please as many people as possible? If so, how?
I think when it boils down to it, that we try to have a specific vision for the games that we have. And the reality is you can't please everybody. So you just have to stick to your vision as much as possible. For more context, Prince Suburbia was, if you had to put things on a scale, it's slightly more passion. And then A Shot in the Dark might lean slightly more mainstream, the whole college theme. But that being said, they both very much have their own vision behind them that we adhere to, and we don't really stray from too much.
Yeah, I think that like you said, with Prince Suburbia, it started off as more of a passion project. And so it leans more towards, having a specific vision that was more about, what you as a creator wanted and not as much about what the audience might want. And then A Shot in the Dark maybe leans a little bit more the other direction. But I think that for both of the games, what's true is that they're in this kind of intersection in the Venn diagram of what is going to be relatively popular and what is going to be relatively profitable or financially sustainable. There are a few polarizing things that you can do in your game where talking about that kind of circle of what's possible, I think there's kind of a few kind of circles that don't overlap within that circle. Obviously one of the most notorious kinks that you can put in your game is NTR, which, has its official definition, Neotare, but pretty much used to describe any type of cuckold, cheating, partner sharing, encompasses a wide variety of things kind of under that umbrella. And it's just one of those super polarizing preferences where if you include it at all, you're going to potentially alienate a large part of your audience. But that said, there is a, significant audience that is looking for that kind of thing for, that is their specific kink. So in that sense, you kind of have to pick one side or the other and then just lean in. There is no middle ground. There is no overlap. You're not going to ever make both groups happy at the same time because they're so separate. So your best bet is to just pick one or the other. And I think we see a lot of times with devs that try to kind of find that middle ground of they do have some cheating or partner sharing content, but it's totally optional. That's obviously okay. If that's their vision, they're totally entitled to do that. But I think that those devs find that it is just a constant point of contention with their players. That's not something that we ever have tried to find a middle ground for. We always, so far we've always made games that are no NTR, no cheating, no partner sharing. Not because we have an issue with it, but just because we know you kind of have to pick one side or the other and lean in. It's just easier for us to be firmly on the side of just no NTR, no cheating. Some of the other polarizing things that you can do with your game where, again, you're not really going to find a middle ground. You pretty much have to pick one or the other and lean in. I would say there's kind of two more that I can think of. One of them is whether your game is very linear and you can see all the content in one playthrough if you make the right choices, or maybe you don't really have many choices at all, which is true for us with Prince of Suburbia. You pretty much just follow the story, you're along for the ride, and there really aren't any meaningful choices. And, you can see everything and unlock every gallery item without hardly any effort. You just click through, versus a game where there's a lot of branching paths and your choices really matter and you can't see everything in one playthrough. And, our game, A Shot in the Dark, our second game, is much more along those lines. And the other one that's kind of polarizing is, harem games where you can, romance every single character pretty much without consequence. And I call those Pokemon collect 'em all games where you don't necessarily have to, but you can romance all of them. And typically they'll even, get to a point that they're happy about it. Whereas, there's games where there's not harem, where, you might have consequences for some of the love interests if you pursue multiple love interests at the same time. And if you do, then they're not all going to be happy about it. And that's definitely one where you kind of just have to lean in one or the other. We also have games on both sides of this. Prince Suburbia is very clearly a harem game. You can collect them all and they're all happy about it. Relatively. And, A Shot in the Dark is the complete opposite. It is not a harem game. There's lots of love interests that are, it's going to come back to bite you if you are romancing multiple characters and depending on the choices you make in that regard. I think that we kind of have a unique perspective that a lot of other devs don't have, that we've made games on both sides of those fences. The choices matter versus linear, the harem versus non-harem. And we can tell you that no matter which one you do, you will have very vocal complainers. You know, when we were making Prince Suburbia and only Prince Suburbia, we got constant complaints about how it's too linear. It's unrealistic how the girls are just totally cool with you, like, you know, banging everyone. We kind of naively thought, oh, well, when we make a game, that's the opposite. Not that we did it for that reason, but we just wanted to do something new and different and, you know, a challenge for us because it was something different. We thought, when we do that, then we won't get any complainers. And now we get tons of complainers in the opposite direction. They want it to be harem. They want it to be easier. They want it to be more linear. That's the reality on those issues. NTR, the branching, harem, these are just some ones where you just have to pick one and you literally cannot make everyone happy.
And I think a part of that where people are getting upset about the differences with linear and non-linear, more choices, is that essentially kind of a risk or something that we take on as a studio, having these two separate games underneath our umbrella that are very different, is that people have come to expect that one thing from Prince of Suburbia, but then with a shot in the dark, they're like, well, how come this isn't like Prince of Suburbia? This is the same developer. And I feel like a lot of fans and players out there, they end up getting caught in that mindset where one developer is going to make one type of game. And if they subvert expectations like that, then it kind of throws them off or makes them upset. Some other things I want to talk about for, you know, trying to please everyone. Not only is it just a balance of, you know, creating a game that's going to be popular and profitable, but I think a key thing is we want to make something that's fun for players, but also balanced with fun for us to create. And ultimately, I think we make a better product if we enjoy and have fun with what we're making as well.
For sure. Yeah. When I talk to aspiring devs about, you know, that circle of what's profitable versus what's popular. And, you know, I'll always say too, like, there's a lot of options within that circle. And for us, you know, we've made two very different games that are still inside that circle. And they're fun for us. They're popular. You know, we can monetize them, learn new things, and just break out of the rut that you can get into working on one type of game.
Another thing I'll say too, that's been a very popular request / suggestion is, you know, what are you guys going to do after Prince of Suburbia? Like, the main story is going to end soon. And it's obvious that a lot of people are getting nervous about it because this game has been going on for a long time. They've been excited about it. They really enjoy it and they want to see it continue. And, you know, that resonates with us. But the reality is, like, the nostalgia of it is one thing that's pulling you towards it. I feel like we won't be able to be fresh about it. We won't be able to create something that you're going to be excited about because we won't be excited about it. So it would kind of fall flat.
Yeah, we've been surprised by how many people are like, is there going to be a sequel? Is there going to be a part 3? Because for most of the development, since it's been going on for, you know, 6 years, has been like, when is this game going to be over? So it's another place where some players want a game that eventually comes to a conclusion, and some players just want to keep playing, you know, new iterations of the same thing. And again, you're never going to make everyone happy. I do think we've found a good compromise. And again, it's not because we want to make everybody happy. You know, that's certainly not our goal. We know that's an impossible goal. But sometimes when a lot of players are clamoring for something, you know, it just tells us that this is something that people want. And so it's not to appease them per se, but it's more just about, well, if this is something that people want and we would be happy to make it, then why not? The walkthrough was definitely in that category of, you know, it wasn't necessarily to appease the people who are like, the game has too many choices. You know, honestly, we've talked about how, like, we were kind of resistant to the idea because we didn't want to appease those players. We're like, this is a game with lots of choices. We don't want to, you know, be diluting down the game in order to please players that want a more linear experience. But the more we thought about it, the more we realized that having a walkthrough helps the players that do want to do multiple playthroughs. It gives them a better player experience. And that's the type of player that we want to appease. And so the fact that some players that want a more linear experience can use the walkthrough to get that, that's just a bonus, right? It wasn't necessarily the only motivation. But I think with Prince Suburbia, we've reached a good compromise, which is wrapping up the main story and not starting a brand new story or just continuing the same story forever and ever. But we plan to offer, you know, some standalone DLC content where we can really have fun and do all the things that we couldn't do in the story, because it's just going to be standalone stories with the characters, you know, that don't have to have a ton of context, and we can really play and do things a little bit outside of the box, the things that we couldn't fit into the story. And so it feels new and fresh in that way, but hopefully we'll still scratch the itch for the players that just want more content with their favorite characters.
To be a little more specific, like we're planning on including pregnancy DLC as a part of that. And then as Jocelyn was saying, the isolated stories. We do take a lot of suggestions, and if they make sense for the vision that we have for the game, if they're not too difficult to implement, we do strongly consider the suggestions, and we highly appreciate them from everyone. And we also pull things out on Patreon and Subscribestar to get a feel for what people are looking for, what they want to see. That includes outfits, that includes what characters are going to have extra scenes. That being said, if there are really obscure requests, like I said, we will hear them, we'll read them and see them, but that doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to put them in the game.
Sometimes I think it can come across to players when developers take suggestions, or have polls that we are, making a game. I've seen the phrase like, making a game by committee. And I feel like we try to strike a balance of, we're certainly not trying to make a game by committee. And when we pull things out on Patreon, it's about finding out what would be popular, but also our Patreon is a pretty limited part of our audience. So for me, it's more about allowing people that want to be involved in the creation of the game to support the development of the game in between releases and to have a hand in creating some of the content. But when we put out options for polls, we obviously only put choices that we would be happy with. So it's not like we're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what the players like, and then whatever they like, we just go with because we have no vision of our own. We choose polling options that are within the vision that we already have. So I think that's important too, that, that you can have both things. You can, as a developer, have your own vision and be true to your own vision and not be swayed by public opinion on a regular basis, but still involve the players that want to have a voice in a way that works for your vision.
One thing that kind of cracks us up is like when people have suggestions like, in Prince of Suburbia, make the boob sizes like 30% smaller, and that won't be that much of a problem or a big deal, right? And to have to redo all that stuff just to appease one person, that's not going to happen.
Just this week, when we were talking about this very topic, I made the comparison of it's like being mad at Taco Bell for not having hamburgers and French fries. Like, you're craving a hamburger and then you go to Taco Bell and they don't have a hamburger. And so you leave them a 1-star review about how much they suck because they don't have hamburgers. That's how it feels as a developer, especially on those more polarizing ones, because it's like, we're not, with Prince Suburbia, which is a true harem game. And we try to be very clear that it's a harem game, or vice versa with A Shot in the Dark. We've recently had a lot of, complaints and criticism around the fact that it's not a harem game and how it would be so much better if it were a harem game. And it just wouldn't be the same game if it were a harem game. And if you like harem games, we've tried to make it very clear that A Shot in the Dark is not one of those games because we don't want to disappoint players. And so it's very frustrating to feel like, why are you coming to our game and wanting it to be something that it's not? You're just constantly bombarded with players wanting your games to be something that they're not because they want more games that they want to play. And they maybe think that you're a good developer and that you make high quality games. And they just wish that you were making the exact game that they wanted. And I sympathize in that that's got to be a frustrating position to be in. But, it's frustrating on both sides for the developer as well. And I think we've just come to the conclusion of, you do have to have your own strong vision. We are not opposed to taking suggestions and getting ideas from the outside to make our vision stronger. But when a suggestion or idea doesn't fit with our vision, it's very easy for us to just thank the person and then just, discard that idea. And that ultimately you can't endlessly chase the validation of players. We can tell you from the perspective of making two very different games, no matter what you do, you will get bombarded with criticism. So you just have to accept that. And again, just pick a side on some of these more polarizing things, lean in, have a strong vision, do what you want to do. And when players are complaining about things that aren't reasonable, you just have to block out that noise. So we hope that answered your questions about the challenges that we face in terms of catering to the really diverse desires of the world of adult games. So thank you for your question, Callisto. We're always excited to hear from our Patreon and Subscribestar supporters.
And remember, if you have any more questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out to us. We're excited to answer more of your questions, and we hope we planted some seeds with you. See you next time.
Bye.